This army that is coming is going to save you guys. And the Prophet ﷺ joined them in battle. And we know that from all of the hadith we talked about at the end of times, Palestine becomes free, the Caliphate established. There's Muslims actually that fight against it, right? We talked a little bit about that. And then there is this one portion that I want us to actually rewatch, because this is a perfect segue.
Visions as a kind of a source of knowledge, but this one has to be shared because it came from the heart of Gaza, from the heart of the man-made famine 2 days ago. Somebody reported that they saw the Prophet ﷺ in a dream, and he was very, very cross. He was very angry. And he was riding on his horse without a saddle. His face was very red, and they were saying, Ya Rasulullah, are you mad at us? And he wouldn't reply. He wouldn't talk to them, and he kept riding, please, Ya Rasulullah, are you mad at us? And he wouldn't reply. And then he came down and he saw that it was a person from Gaza and said, go for you are blessed into Shaheed wa Hamid. Like, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at them, the onlookers, the people who stood by and let you be slaughtered. And then he used this, earth-shattering verse. He said, whoever walks away from this, Allah will replace them with another people that are not like you. So we should all shudder and fear for ourselves that will we be with those who are going to be replaced? How are we so sure that we are going to be able to face Rasulullah ﷺ on Judgment Day with our head high? I don't know how people make excuses for themselves after all of this. After this river of blood, they still say, oh, legally speaking, I'm not obliged to say anything. You don't know what I'm doing behind closed doors. Oh, you angry mob of Muslims, you're so ignorant. You don't know me. I'm playing 4D chess. I'm playing the large game here. I'm too metaphysical for your feeble minds. And these kind of arrogant excuses that ulama make, they're so hard-hearted. I don't know where this comes from. This is not Islam. This is not the prophetic tradition.
Sufis,
So this video is an amazing analysis of scholarship. I do recommend people watch it. We're not going to cover everything just because for the sake of time and what we want to cover. But it just goes to show one of the most important things that we want to cover, which is the idea of scholarship lacking. And that's the first lecture, the betrayal of scholarship. So this is the opening question. If you guys remember from last time, everyone try to bring your phones out right now and go to canva.live, and I'm going to open it's an anonymous question. So, a lot of you got it right. When you guys were talking about corrupt scholars, misguided scholars, hypocrites, technically not wrong, but it's a little vaguer. But the scholars is what we're talking about over here. I'm going to end this session. So look at this. This is a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. O Messenger of Allah, what do you fear for your nation more than the false Messiah? The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, the imams of misguidance. Okay? Just so you know the scale of what we're talking about, we don't take it lightly unless Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says so. And he's giving it a very weighty status over here, scholarship. The imams of misguidance. And of course, this is not an isolated hadith that I'm bringing you, even though that's one and it's authentic enough to accept. There's so many narrations talking about scholarship, becoming corrupt. You have, the worst of my nation are the scholars who go to the rulers, and the best of my nation are the rulers who go to the scholars. If you really understand this hadith, this is one of the wisest political statements to ever have been uttered by any human being. All right. And of course, it's sourced from the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it's not man-made anyways. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala reported that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, verily, among what I fear most for my nation is every hypocrite with a knowledgeable tongue. Somebody who studied the books, but their heart and their deeds are devoid of what they studied. And that's exactly what Umar radiallahu ta'ala is elaborating on. He has learned with his tongue, but he is ignorant of the heart and good deeds. So you ask them a question, they know the answer. They studied the books, man. They have the answer right there. But take a look at their life. Take a look at what they're doing. And so the final one I'm going to say, Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one of the greatest Sahaba, he says, do you know what will demolish Islam? Look at that statement there. Do you know what will demolish Islam? And Ziyad bin Hudayr radiallahu ta'ala said, no, I don't know. And Umar radiallahu ta'ala said, Islam will be demolished by the faults of scholars, the arguments of hypocrites over the book, and the judgment of the misguided leaders. Does Umar ibn Khattab make stuff up like this? He's speaking from knowledge, he's speaking from what he learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He's speaking from all of that, the experience he has about Islam. He knows this to be true. He knows that there will never be an external force that comes and destroys the Muslims. It's going to be an internal problem from day one. And so we are going to talk about, well, what is this talking about? This vast literature corpus of ahadith talking about misguided scholarship. Does that apply to our times? What does that mean? Who are the misguided scholars? Because we can't just go around giving that label to any scholar, right? Because they're righteous scholars as well. They're innocent scholars as well. So you're gonna hear a lot of now very specific figures. I'm not afraid to name drop when it comes to things that are very apparent. And so the two villains of Islamic scholarship we're gonna go from Arabia and Egypt. Now why did I pick Arabia and Egypt? I want you guys to think. I know this is some crazy stuff you're seeing on the board right now, but why did I pick Arabia and Egypt? Those two lands are where the greatest Islamic universities are, allegedly, according to what the people view it as. Al-Azhar University in Egypt, and in Arabia you have Medina University. These are the hallmarks, right? This is the vision. I remember when I started practicing, I started memorizing the Quran, I started studying Islam seriously. I would go out and I would tell everybody at the masjid. If they ask me what I want to do, I'm going to go to Al-Azhar, I'm going to study, I'm going to become a scholar. That was me when I was 19 years old. And I would have uncles come and say, no, that's not going to work out. I didn't know what they were talking about at the time. I was like, what do you mean? That's the best Islamic university ever. How could you say something like that? And it was only my ignorance that didn't help me realize what's going on in these places. So the first is Arabia because of the allegedly greatest Islamic universities over there. You have Abdul Aziz Rais. This guy, he's not just any scholar. He is one of the most quoted, the most active lecturers at Medina University, at Al Saud University, at Al University. And he's live on television all the time. He's one of the highest level scholars, or at least one of the most popular level scholars in all of Arabia. That's Abdul Aziz Rais in Saudi Arabia. I want to specify that. And then these two people on the right, they're not scholars. They are social media figures. But guess what? They listen to scholars. If a scholar, no matter how messed up the thing that the scholar will say, I'm showing you an example of there will always be people that listen to them. That's why this is a big deal. Okay? And so you can see, we're going to show a clip of Abdul Aziz Rais saying this. And we're not going to go to the clips. These are very popular clips. You can see if you go to YouTube SP files, you'll see Shamsi, for example, say it's a Palestinian's fault. What's happening in Gaza, because if the Palestinians didn't go out and rebel against Israel and resist against Israel, the media wouldn't be on them and there would be no reason for war. That's what he says. Faris al-Hamadi had a very popular clip when he was sitting with Sneeko as well. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say for Shamsi, it wasn't even just that the Palestinians were fighting back. He blamed it that they're sinful, they dance and all that. It's because of that too.
Yeah, he also brought up that they're mubtadi'ah, right? That these people, they're not on the right aqidah. Look at the stuff that they do. It's just so much attack on the Palestinians, right? And he barely. And then he comes out every now and then. Yeah, I'm against Israel. Look, I do my part. I call out Israel. But if you take a look at his content, he'll call out Palestinians 10 times and he'll call out Israel once, right? And Faris al-Hamadi, he's a well-known agent. He's literally bought and sold by the UAE government, and that's public information at this point if you've seen that in Hyperchoose videos. But he's supporting. He's like, no, don't boycott these companies. You're going to ruin the deals of the rulers because they have deals with these companies. It's bad for the GDP of the economy. People are going to lose their jobs because of you. That's what he's arguing, right? And they're only arguing because this is what scholarship has come out and said. That it's haram to boycott and destroy these contracts. That the Palestinians are mubtadi'ah, that they're people that of bid'ah, that they don't follow Islam properly and they're not on the right aqidah. And look at this is live television. He's unapologetic about this. And I don't know if you guys have gone to Umrah or Hajj, you recognize the background. This is the masjid. This is Masjid al-Nabawi right here. Okay, he's living in Medina right now. Look at this. What he said in Masjid al-Nabawi.
للحاكم سواء كان ملكا او رئيس دوله الى اخره له نصف ساعه في التلفزيون يخرج على الهواء مباشره يسني ويشرب الخمر، شو موقفنا منه؟ على الهواء مباشره يسني ويشرب الخمر، لنفترض شو موقفنا الشرعي؟ اذا كنت امامه انكر عليه ولو بصوت ولو قدام الناس ولو امام الناس، لكن تراعي مصلحه المجتمع، اما اذا كنت وراءه لا تذكر اسمه ولا تنكر عليه طريقه عرض الناس عليه، قل وقد اشتهر الزنا واخذ يبث في التلفاز وغيره، فاتقوا الله والزنا محرم، ثم تاتي باسلوب تدعو اليهم تجعل الناس تجتمع قلوبهم عليه.
So he's out here saying if the ruler's all corrupt and he's doing all of these terrible things, don't call him out publicly. Make dua for him, gather the people around him soft-heartedly, advise him. That's what he's talking about over here. Going out and calling him out publicly, you have to obey him. Right? And is this from Islam? Is this really Islamic? And they quote a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saying, he said, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, obey the ruler even if he whips to your back and takes your wealth. We're going to see how that's a misinterpretation later on in the lecture. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about misguided scholars, we're not talking about somebody who slips up on their references or makes up something. No, we're talking about people that are straight up selling out. And at the other hand, look at the state of a scholar that does the opposite. Alright? So Sheikh Abdul Aziz Tarif is a very popular figure. He's still in prison. There were rumors that he came out of prison, but no evidence has been shown of that actually happening. That was last year. So he's still in prison. And you're going to see he's a scholar that is in his early 30s at this point. Okay, censorship is not as big as it is right now, even though it was very prevalent back then. And you'll see he says some very basic stuff about Islam. And this interview right here, this question answer right here, is what got him arrested. Literally, when he walked out of the studio after this, the cops were waiting outside for him. Alright, and I want you guys to see what would cause something like this.
بالنسبة للعلماء هم الذين يزيلون اللبس الذي يقع فيه الناس، وقد أشار الدكتور عبد المحسن إلى هذه القضية، ولهذا النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام أمر بالرجوع إليهم في كثير من القضايا، بل جعلهم الأمان في الأمة. العالم ما ترك في حاله ولم يساوم في قضية من القضايا فإنه يجري على الحق سواء كان مشرقيا أو مغربيا. أعظم فتنة تمر بالعالم أن يساوم على دينه أو يساوم على ماله في قضية من القضايا ترغب في توجه أو فكر أو سياسة، وهذه قد نبه عليها جماعة من العلماء ونبه عليها من جاء في الآثار كثيرة كحذيفة بن اليمان وهو أمين سر رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، كما روى ابن نعيم في كتابه الحلية قال: إذا كنت تريد أن تعلم أن الفتنة قد أصابتك فانظر إلى حرام كنت تراه حلالا أو حلال كنت تراه حراما فاعلم أن الفتنة قد أصابتك. التقلبات التي تشير إليها ونحو ذلك هي أيدي خفية، وهذا نحن وإن كان لنا الظاهر ولكن ندرك في كثير من القضايا أيدي خفية حركت كثيرا من مقاعد العلماء حتى أدارتهم إلى نواحي أنا أريد أن أنا على الإعلام خفيا في مناصبهم مساومة العلماء في أموالهم في حرياتهم، هذا الأمر لا ينبغي أن يغفل عنه في كثير من القضايا واستمرار كثير من الأحكام الشرعية سواء في بلدنا أو في غيره من بلدان العالم الإسلامي. تجد العلماء على لقمة واحدة ثم يتقلبون ثم يصبحون أوزاعا، ولهذا تجد لو أردت من مسائل الدين كثير من القضايا أصبح فيها قولان في زمننا، بينما تجد على أكثر من قول 10 أقوال، ولهذا تجد على مر 14 قرنا تجد العلماء على قول واحد، ولكن في زمننا هذا لماذا؟ لأن أصبحت المساومة والتغيير. ينبغي أن ندرك هذا الأمر أن العالم ينبغي أن يبتعد بماله ونفسه عن مواضع الفتن، ومواضع الفتن هي التي تقلب الأمور. العالم ينبغي أن يبتعد بماله ونفسه عن مواضع الفتن، ومواضع الفتن هي التي تقلب الأمور. العالم ينبغي أن يبتعد بماله ونفسه عن مواضع الفتن، ومواضع الفتن هي التي تقلب الأمور. وهذه المواضع التي تحرف العالم عن طريق الحق، أولا أن يجعل
التعريف بماله ونفسه. نفسه عرفت، لكن مالي يعني لا يتقاضى مثلا من الدولة مثلا.
أولا ينبغي للعلماء قدر الإمكان أن يتكففوا، هذا من جهة الأمر، وينبغي أن لا يبالغوا في مسألة الركون إلى الدنيا كأصحاب الوجاهات سواء كانوا وزراء أو كانوا مثلا في المناصب الدينية والدينية ينبغي أن لا يساووا أنفسهم بوزراء البلديات ووزراء المواصلات ووزراء
يعني تتطلب أنهم يعني يزهدون
لا أريد أن يزهدوا في الدنيا، أريد أن يتكثروا، ولكن لا يعلقوا أنفسهم كما يعلق الإنسان مشلحة في مشجع، وإنما حتى يزال هذا المشجع يسقط الإنسان. ينبغي للإنسان أن يشارك الأمة برأيه وكذلك بإدراكه، ولكن يبتعد عن مواضع المساومة. هذا ليس قولا لي وإنما قول للسلف والنبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. وقد جاء حذيفة بن اليمان قال لا ينبغي للرجل أن يقف مواضع الفتن. قال مواضع الفتن؟ قال أن يأتي إلى أبواب الأمراء. وهذا في قول حذيفة بن اليمان المراد بذلك قال أن يقول الكلمة فيصدقهم في ذلك. وأن تجد الإنسان لما يكون الإنسان في موضع فيه مثلا مهيب صاحب جاه أو سلطان ونحو ذلك، حينما يتكلم تجد الناس كلهم يطلقون برؤوسهم يقول صح. ألا تجد هذه العبارة؟ هذه العبارة موجودة، وهذا نوع من التلبيس الذي يقع فيه الإنسان. أعظم خيانة للأمة أن يظهر الحق، أن يظهر الباطل من شخص يقتدى به وهو في ذاته أن يكون معذور ونيته حسنة، ولكن يصوب له ذلك الخطأ ولا يصح ولا يبين. ولهذا النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قد بين كثيرا من مراتب النصح والأمر بالمعروف والنهي عن المنكر، وأعظمها أن يقول الإنسان كلمة الحق عند سلطانه.
Wow.
Isn't this crazy? Did you guys find anything controversial in what he said? Scholars should be careful of compromising, right? And subhanAllah, that's what happens. Does anyone have reflections on what they saw? It just means places. It's a word for places of compromise, I believe. Places where you know things that are going to be bad. Well, let me give you this. I want to picture it. Oh, it's just speaking in a way where people can misinterpret it for wrong things such as rebellion. Okay. I didn't know. What was that? So, this Sheikh Abdul Aziz Tarifi, may Allah have mercy on him and protect him. He was, I think, 30 years old, 31 years old in this interview. So he was a very young scholar, subhanAllah. And so, this is what we're talking about, the scholars of Arabia specifically. You've probably heard the term Salafi. Hands up if you've heard the term Salafi before. Okay, that's everyone, right? Now, Salafi linguistically just means people who follow the Prophet ﷺ and the 3 generations after, right? That are understanding Islam. So everyone's a Salafi. You won't find anybody against the Sahaba. You'll never find anybody against the Tabi'in and the Tabi'in. However, when we're talking about that, we're talking about a very modern movement that we're going to continue on to. And this is something I talk about whenever those people come and say, well, we are on the truth and everyone else is upon falsehood, right? And then that really, really narrows down the Muslims to like a very small percentage, I'll tell you that. And then the rest of them are not on the correct methodology, they're Ahlul Bid'ah, they're people of innovation. And the good goy paradox really takes that out, okay? The good goy paradox is this. Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, if you want to see who's on the truth, look at where the swords of the enemies are pointed. That's the statement of Ali radiallahu ta'ala. If you want to see who's on the truth, look at where the swords of the enemies are pointed. And the problem with this discrete group is that if you look at the swords of the enemies, they're being given to that group. And you'll see this. This is a state report by the CIA called Stealing Al-Qaeda's Playbook. Now, obviously, they are using Al-Qaeda as a reason for all of their injustice and stuff like that. The real core of it is to regulate Muslims. And everybody knows that, right? There was no weapons of mass destruction. They were not hiding, Osama bin Laden in Iraq. None of that stuff was true. They're just making that stuff up because they want the resources, they want the Muslims weak, they want to destroy our land. That's what they're doing. And they literally say, and the reason this is public, by the way, like how did CIA documents come out? 2 reasons. Number one, WikiLeaks. If you know WikiLeaks, the number 1 most wanted man in the world for a very long time was Julian Assange. He died pretty recently. I think it was last year he was killed. Right? He was found out and killed because he was hiding in Ukraine. Julian Assange became the number 1 most wanted man in the world because he was responsible for a website called WikiLeaks, which was able to literally infiltrate the CIA database and leak all of their documents. Okay? And this happened 2010. 2010, WikiLeaks did the biggest mass drop of confidential US information ever. and they literally chased him across the globe. He went from Russia to Ukraine, like he was traveling country to country seeking asylum, and they still got him. And so, and if you see videos online, like he's locked in a cubicle in multiple layers underground, and he's like it's like a cubicle like this, and his whole life is that. He has a bed, he gets up, he needs movement for his exercise, all he can do is squat and stuff in place. He can't even run around. Okay, that's Julian Assange. So that's why stuff like this is up. And secondly, a lot of these manuals that are being released, they're sent to different countries. Like government to government sent to different countries, because other countries, they want other countries to implement their blueprint on how to, really oppress the Muslims and keep them brainwashed. So that's why these CIA documents come out. They literally said the US could discreetly fund mainstream Salafi figures like the Madkhalis, who are effective in siphoning off support from jihadis, obviously using that as an excuse. It is essential that the US hand not be seen. If you were truly what you claim to be, right, on the right path, wouldn't America hate you? Why are they saying over here that we're going to give you money, and we need to give them money and not be caught doing it? Because that gives a version of Islam that favors what we want. It makes the Muslims weak. It does what everything you heard, obey the ruler even if he does zina on TV, right? If Muslims believe that en masse, they're easy for the pickings. So that's why you have that document come out. And subhanAllah, these are the things, this is one of the biggest reasons why they love the Salafis. Ibn Baz, he came out with a fatwa in 1991 and said, because Saddam Hussein took over parts of Kuwait, so that's like, Kuwait is a sort of a shared land between Saudi Arabia and Iraq. Saudi Arabia took it in the 1960s or 70s or so, and Saddam Hussein said, no, it's rightfully ours. You guys took it unjustly, I'm going to take it back. When that happened, Saudi Arabia didn't have the power to fight against Iraq. Okay, they literally didn't. And so they sought American help, but guess what? America couldn't come to Saudi Arabia because the people would never let it happen. People were ready to burn down the American embassies. People themselves were going to run on the streets and attack Americans if they ever saw them in Saudi Arabia. The people hated it. So guess what happened? To win over the favor of the people, they had to have the scholar say something. Ibn Baz, along with a handful of fatwas from the Saudi scholar committee, they gave out a fatwa saying it's obligatory to use whatever repels harm, even by seeking help from non-Muslims. They gave a white ticket, a blanket statement, said it is an obligation. It's not only halal, it's an obligation to have the Americans come over here. Because the Iraqi Saddam Hussein's a rebel, he's not a Muslim, he's gonna come. Which honestly, that's justifiable. But for them to now bring Americans into their soil, the same country that is responsible for killing Muslims like no other, that is crazy. But now what? He's in his grave now, answering for his fatwa. And how many Iraqis were killed because of that fatwa? Millions. Entire cities leveled to the floor, if you guys remember from last week. That's the power of a fatwa. That's the power of a fatwa. And where did this start? I'm going to give you just TLDRs over here. Because I'll give you like resources if you ever are more interested to get into it. You will see later on. How did all of this happen? It happened in the 1700s. This entire idea of what a Salafi is. It was originally called Wahhabism, and it started by a man named Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And this is a book called Tariq al-Najd. It's written by their own sources. Okay, Hussein ibn al-Hannam. The guy was essentially the right-hand man. Not maybe like right-hand man militarily, but he used to follow Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab everywhere. And he used to write in his notes. And Tariq al-Najd is a book on how they revived Arabia. So they're boasting about this stuff. Full screen. Okay, so this is the book, and these are just some quotations from the book, so you guys understand how could you brainwash an entire population to believe some outrageous stuff, like allying with the most oppressive regime in the world, of obeying the ruler even if he's committing zina for 30 minutes on TV. Like, how could you get people to believe something so ridiculous? It was a 250-year project, and so you can see over here. There was a perfect recipe for disaster in Arabia in the 1750s. You had Ibn Abdul Wahhab, he returned from his study travels, and then he came up with a new definition of La ilaha illallah, and he says, you can see over here, he says, فَمَنْ لَمْ يَكْفُرُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ مِنْ دَوْلَةِ التَّرْكِيَّةِ وَعِبَادُ الْقُبُورِ كَأَهْلِ مَكَّةِ وَغَيْرِهِمْ مِمَّنْ عِبَادُ الصَّالِحِينَ. So, he's saying whoever does not do takfir of all of those mushrikeen in Dawlat al-Turkiyya. Dawlat al-Turkiyya is not the Turkey we see today, it's the Ottoman Empire. That's where all of the Muslims are essentially. That's the main body of Muslims. He's saying they're all mushrikeen. Okay? And earlier he says Dawlat al-Turkiyya kullaha. Alright? So he's saying all of them. He's making blanket statements of them, of takfir and stuff like that. That was one thing. That's one recipe of this maniacal cook. The second recipe is this guy named Ibn Saud. Right? So over here, Ibn Saud, he talks about, I see that you hate all of this, what's allegedly idol worship. He called all of people who are doing something called istighatha, which is, paying, visiting to the dead, seeing that Allah favors people who are righteous that have passed away. Nobody believes the dead have any power, right? Nobody doing istighatha actually do that. Everybody knows the power is to Allah alone. But Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, one time he said examples of istighatha where he raised his hands and he said, "Oh Allah, from your love of Al-Abbas," quote the Prophet ﷺ, "grant us rain," right? Because they're suffering a drought. So you have the Sahaba, for example, involved in istighatha. So it shows clear cut that it's definitely not kufr. Some scholars differ whether it's halal or haram, but that's a different issue. He's saying that's kufr. And everybody who is involved in that or justifies that are mushrikeen. Ibn Saud comes, he's a tribal leader that is a well-known highway robber. Literally that's his main income. His tribe sits in Najd, that's central Arabia. A lot of travel happening back and forth, and him and his goons literally, they take everything from anybody passing through. He's just a well-known highway robber. He comes and says, I have a lot of power. You have an amazing understanding that I'm liking. If we hold hands together, we can take over Arabia. That's literally the first conversation that he has with them is let's take over Arabia. He's not talking about Islam. He's not talking about bringing people, making people more practicing. He's talking about conquest. He's a power-hungry individual, Ibn Saud. Alright? And Ibn Abdul Wahhab actually takes him up on that offer. And they go out, and by the way, Ibn Saud, in the same book you'll see, Great Britain, they entered through the Kuwait port already in Arabia. And Ibn Saud meets British agents and they strike a three-way deal. The British supply them with weapons, Ibn Saud supplies them with the manpower, and Ibn Abdul Wahhab gives them the blanket scholarly statements to legitimize whatever they're doing. Do you guys see the recipe for disaster now? Britain, Ibn Saud, and Ibn Abdul Wahhab, the three of them come together, and this movement, they go out slaughtering everyone. This narration at the bottom over here is them going and killing tribal leaders. They tell the tribal leaders, join us, give us bay'ah, be subservient to us, or else you'll face the consequences. They say, no, why the hell, I have people to look after, I'm a tribe of my own, why would I become subservient to you? When they get a no, guess what they do? Jum'ah. Salatul Jum'ah. After the Jum'ah prayer is over, they enter the masjid, they storm the masjid together, and they slaughter them. They kill them in the masjid. Do you think this is bad? This is the start. This is where they started. All of Arabia going forward, there are massacres after massacres. Women and children were not spared. I'm telling you, women and children, this is all detailed in this book. And they're happy about it when they write about it. They say they were reviving Islam.
This is their own book.
This is their own book. Tariq al-Najd is not it's a primary historical source evidence. Okay, that's number one, because it's Ibn al-Ghanam was there at the time, he was alive, and he recorded it, and it's preserved. So nobody can reject Tariq al-Najd as source material. Secondly, the guy loved them. He wasn't biased. He was biased for them, actually. He wasn't biased against them, he was biased for them. So if anything written in this book is lighthearted. You should assume that it's worse than it's written, because the guy loved Ibn Abdul Wahhab so much. Do you guys see how it all started now? 1750s, this recipe for disaster comes together, and literal slaughters being carried out all over Arabia. And Britain, of course, they're happy with that, because they've done that everywhere. And then the second half of the story, because I said the two villains of scholarship, one of them was Arabia, the second one was Egypt. Because Egypt, of course, houses what a lot of people deem to be the greatest Islamic university, Al-Azhar. which it was at one point, but it isn't anymore, and you'll see why. Muhammad Abdu over here, and we're going to take a break. We're going to take a discussion and a break in a bit, so I hope you're not getting information overloaded. Scholars of Egypt, Muhammad Abdu, the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar University. Grand Mufti. He's not just any scholar, he's literally the Grand Mufti. There is documented evidence that he was a Freemason scholar. And it comes from this book right here, I'll show you. And I just want you to acknowledge what's going on over here, by the way. Like we're going to talk about like 100 to 200 years ago, like what happened in Al-Azhar. I want you to understand everything we're going to talk about right now about Al-Azhar exists today. This is the former Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar until about 5 years ago. His name is Ali Jum'a. And this is the current Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar right now. His name is Ahmed al-Tayyib. Both of them regularly during their Friday khutbahs legitimize the rule of Sisi as being a great leader. Ali Jum'a in one of his khutbahs, he came out and said, Abdul Fattah Sisi and his army kamithli Musa wa Harun. That Abdul Fattah Sisi and his army are like Musa and Harun alayhi salam. He's comparing the ruler of Egypt, Prime Minister of Egypt, who is one of the primary rulers responsible for the genocide of Palestinians, by the way. He's the one who's closing the Rafah border. He's the one who's currently in an arms trade deal with Israel. He's the one who, whenever a Palestinian crosses the Egyptian border, literally unarmed, seeking help, he has a kill on-site command to his Egyptian soldiers, and there are videos online. There are videos online, you can see Egyptian soldiers, they were being screamed at saying, don't shoot, he's unarmed, he's innocent, he's fleeing oppression, and they shoot on sight. Muslim to Muslim. Muslim to Muslim. Blood. Because this guy, Abdul Fattah Sisi, the ruler of this land, that's what he ordered. And all of the massacres he did, Rabaa massacre, he's wanted internationally to pay for crimes against humanity, many things he did, killing women and children in protests. And these guys come out and say, no, this guy's an amazing guy. He's like Musa alayhi salam, he's the best. So I want you to understand, anything we're talking about, it still exists today. There's people locally that praise him, by the way, Ali Jum'a. He's a teacher of actually somebody I know over here. So this is the book, The Awakening of a Sick Man. It's by Muwaffaq Mani al-Marja'. And it talks about scholarship, the role of scholarship in the fall of the Ottoman Caliphate. This book, now both of these books are in Arabic only. They're not translated. Those are my translation and stuff like that. But if you, I guess you can only read it if you know Arabic. If you don't know Arabic, let me know. I can show you. I have a translation log for a lot of these books and stuff like that. Anyways, but Awakening of a Sick Man has primary historical documentation. This is the type of sources that you can't reject. You can't say, I disagree with the author. No, these are scanned documents. These are mass witness testimonies in this book. This was published in the University of Cairo in 1984. Okay? So, you'll, actually I even have the doc here right now. You guys will see how crazy this is. If you thought Arabia was some crazy lore, look at this. I don't know why
He's gonna have to exit, I think. Just copy paste.
So these are, now we're not going to cover this whole document, even though I bleed out a lot in this, but Napoleon Bonaparte, 1798, I hope you guys have heard of his expedition that came to Egypt. So he was in Egypt for 2.5 years only. He came in, just like any person, he knows he's at a disadvantage when he's away from a home base militarily. So he sets his military for battles. He himself sneaks into the middle of Egypt as a convert to Islam. He learns Arabic, he memorizes the Quran. This stuff happened before he came, by the way. That he already knew. He knew how to play politics. He knew if he comes in, he needs to establish partners. He needs to establish a good relationship with the natives, so he doesn't pretty much get beat right off the bat. And that's what he did. And so he used to be in the halaqas in Al-Azhar, studying, reciting Quran, stuff like that. You have these narrations, by the way, online. And then he got found out, right? Because everybody was understanding, there are these French fleets in the north fighting and stuff like that. This guy's a new French convert that came last year. Put the two and two together. Are you related to the army that's fighting against us in the north? And he's like, oh no, I don't know anything about them. And eventually they find out, and when they find out, he holds young scholars hostage. Like he calls these guys and he's like, hey guys, I got found out. Time to execute our plan B. His army comes straight to Al-Azhar University, storm the gates of Al-Azhar University. They hold all of the young prodigy scholars. He knows them name by name. Who are the best scholars over here? They're the most valuable. Their heads are the most expensive heads over here. Hold them hostage. So they hold all the young prodigy scholars hostage, and they're now demanding like a safe exit. Okay, that's what happened. So this was 1801. 1801, Al-Azhar is being held hostage by France, essentially. Okay, and they couldn't coordinate quick enough. The Muslims are all over the place, disunited. The Ottoman Empire itself is currently like they're in a completely like all lockdown mode right now because they're fighting so many fronts, and because of that, Napoleon was able to leave Egypt scot-free. He came with I believe it was less than 10,000 soldiers, and he literally repeatedly won battles of over 40,000 Ottoman and British soldiers fighting against him, again and again for 2 years straight, until he realized there's no hope anymore. This next battle is really going to end us. I'm out of here. He deserted his army in Egypt. He left alone, and I think he took one of his generals with him, and he took all of the money of Al-Azhar. All of it. Like over 95%. Okay?
How did he take it with him? He was in
His army has to carry it for him.
Oh, he took his army with him.
But his army doesn't know he's going to betray them. So his army is being told, load up the ships with all this money. And they're like, we're loading it up. Hey, yo, is it going to have enough space for us too? I got you. He dips in the middle of the night with all of the loot. Okay? And his army is left over there. So he takes all the money from Al-Azhar University. And by the way, I gave a little bit of an elaboration to bridge the gaps, but this is generally what happened. I don't know exactly how the communication between him and his army went. But I do know he deserted them, and he left with a ship full of money from Al-Azhar University. Al-Azhar University, after this, their young prodigy scholars were killed. Those hostages were killed. Okay? And their funding is gone. So even if they're sincere, right now they're like pacified. They're handicapped. Okay? That's one thing right now so far about Al-Azhar. 20 years after he leaves, Muhammad Ali Pasha, he calls the governors of Egypt, the Mamluk sultanates, for his 26th son's birthday party, and he signals his guards, and all his guards kill the governors at the birthday. It was a bloodbath. And he forces or seizes the throne by force and becomes the new ruler of Egypt, and also the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar. Believe it or not, he was a mufti. He was a scholar. Memorized the Quran, studied the hadith and everything like that. He killed the Mamluks, seized control of Egypt, and he's currently the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar at the same time, in the 1840s. He's the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar as well. 1830s actually. So 1830s, I believe he's the Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar. Student mission to Paris, okay? 1826. He might have actually become then Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar. So he did this as soon as he became Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar. So it was mid-1820s. He sent kids to Paris. Now, why Paris? Egypt should hate Paris because Egypt is part of the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire is currently at war with France. How is Muhammad Ali Pasha able to send people to Paris when his nation is at war? The answer is, he's not Ottoman. When he seized control, he departed from the Ottoman. I mean, he literally killed the Mamluk sultanates. Okay? The Ottoman Empire is not happy about that, because they're the ones that entrusted the Mamluks to govern that area. So he completely cuts off his relation with the Ottoman Empire. He is now allies with France, clearly, because he's sending his boys to Paris to study. And every time they study in Paris and they come back, they're given the best state positions. All of these names you're seeing over here, they took state positions within Egypt. These are all scholars. We're not talking about rulers, we're talking about scholars over here. Grand Mufti, all scholars over here, and they go to France and they study and they come back and they're teaching Islam. The Islam they learned in France. MashaAllah. And so you can see going on, like this chain of Freemasonry never breaks. If you guys know who knows Freemasonry here, by the way? Raise your hands. Anybody know what Freemasonry is here? Oh, that's a few actually. So Freemasonry, it's a slightly complex organization. At the core, it's Satan worship. At the core, it's literally Satan worship. But a lot of people that join, like the lower members and ranks and stuff like that, they're in it for the money, they're in it for the connections, because these alleged Satan worshippers have a lot of money and influence. Okay? That's Freemasonry. It's Satan worshippers. Satan worship became a thing because Napoleon Bonaparte came, he established these institutes, Institut de l'Egypte is one, and allegedly, this isn't clarified in the book, there's a Freemason lodge established after him called Kawkab al-Sharq. And that Freemason lodge, Kawkab al-Sharq, is all of these documents that you're going to see. Jamaluddin al-Afghani, who was also allegedly a scholar, and he was the teacher of the next Grand Mufti in the 1900s. This is his acceptance letter to Kawkab al-Sharq as a Freemason. Islamic scholar, Freemason. Muhammad Ali Basha was a 33rd degree Freemason himself, but that was clear because he's a bloodthirsty psycho. So like you'd expect him to be a Freemason. But these scholars that they didn't commit any massacres and stuff like that, they're all Freemasons. I think these are more narrations. Yeah, Muhammad Abdu, the Grand Mufti that comes after, later on, he's in the 1920s and 30s, also a Freemason, as confessed by Surun Rashid Riba. And guess what Freemasonry does as well, by the way? Freemasonry, coming once again from France, they're such rationalists. They think of everything as completely rational. That in Tafsir al-Manar, by the Grand Mufti of Egypt, he talks about angels or photons. That's what he says in Tafsir al-Manar. The photons you see in the air, those are angels. And he says the jinns, those are bacteria. The bacteria is goofy stuff. But he thought he was a genius. Oh, I'm part of the secret Freemason club. I got money in club like nobody else. And he starts writing these tafsirs. The Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar University publishing tafsirs saying this type of nonsense. I don't think the rest of this is important, to be honest. I hope you guys understand what we're talking about here. This is Al-Azhar now. Deal with it. Right? So, any questions so far? I know this was a lot throwing at you guys. Like, whoa. I thought, I knew scholarship might have been lacking. I didn't know they were straight up selling out like this. But they were. And the last slide, before we take our break, is this was all intentional. This wasn't a byproduct, like, the scholars just happened to be the first ones to sell out. Stuff like that. No, that's not true. This is from a book called Islamic Modernism. I know a lot of book references to it as well. Ustada Maryam Jamila, she's the author. If you guys don't know her, she's one of the legends of the past century. She died 2012. May Allah have mercy on her soul. She was born in a Jewish family from Germany. She was raised in New York as Jewish, and she accepted Islam when she was 21 or so. Around 21, 22 years old, she accepted Islam. When she accepted Islam, she started learning about the state of the Muslims, about Muslim affairs and stuff like that. And she was extremely inspired by Maulana Maududi. He's writing Rahimahullah from Pakistan. And so she traveled to Pakistan, got married to one of the Jamaatul Islami members over there, and she started producing some of the greatest books we have of Islamic history. And I'm not kidding. Like, I'm legit, I've read, when it comes to Islamic history and ideology, I've probably read 50 books or so right now. She puts her in top 5. For sure, Islamic Modernism, this specific book. So, this right here, they write about, this is William Hunter. William Hunter, pretty popular British colonizer. He was in control of India, or the subcontinent, Greater India, you could say, at the time. And look at what he says. I know this is hard to read, so I'm going to read it out loud. We should at length have the Muhammadan youth educated according to our own plan. So that's the first thing. They're targeting education. And Muhammadan just means Muslim. They just call them Muhammadan. We need them educating with our own plan without interfering with their religion in any way. If we get found out that we are trying to make them go against their religion, we're cooked. This will only work out if we control their education whilst making them think that it's not conflicting with their religion. Okay? That's what William Hunter is saying. This is early 1800s, by the way. Okay? And this is quotations from his book, Indian Muslimans. So, the rising generations of Muhammadans would then tread the steps which have conducted the Hindus not long ago, the most bigoted nation on earth. So obviously, after Yeah, Hindus were actually a very difficult nation for Britain to conquer. If you guys, I have a very long video on YouTube that talks about the East India Company, but you'll see the Hindu, like the Maratha caste of Hindus, they were going crazy. But they took up a long time, but they actually colonized the Hindu population, but they couldn't colonize the Muslims just yet. Okay? And so he's talking about like, they will, a state of easy tolerance. They'll accept anything coming at them. Such a tolerance to modern civilization implies less earnest belief than their fathers, but it has freed them, as it would liberate the Muslims from cruelties which they endured in the name of mistaken religion. So like, paint history as negative and say we are here to bring you modern civilizations. It is more doubtful. Okay, this is not. I think the last important part that he talks about over here is one of the biggest methods for them to restructure education is to convince the Muslims, you're not going to get anything from studying Islam. You won't get a job. You can't get a job as a judge anymore. We colonized you guys. If you want to get a job as a judge, study our law. You have to study law in Britain, right? So you're not going to get any money. You're not going to get any status in society, right? What is a scholar really anyways in society? So like, what are you doing this for? You're going to be a nobody. So that's one of their primary things of convincing the young Muslims to go away from studying Islam. And we're going to talk about this last part of the righteous scholars later, but I want you to understand, this is in India. You might think it's disconnected, but he's a general of Britain. And Britain, at the time in the 1800s, was controlling, I'd say, nearly half the Muslim world. Before the fall of the Ottoman Empire, believe it or not, it shrunk a lot due to conquest from Britain. So do you think a general of Britain, when he's making this entire game plan, colonizing Muslims, he's only keeping it for India? He's keeping it for the Muslims everywhere. So I want you guys to understand, when you saw all of those things with Al-Azhar and everything that happened, it was all intentional. These colonial powers were thinking, throughout history, whenever we want to battle against the Muslims, they always came back. They will never lose in force. If you really want to make them lose, you have to attack them. We have to attack their faith, their belief. That's what George Curzon said, by the way. It's a very popular quote. I don't have it on here right now. So, this is where we're going to take a bit of a break, inshallah. We'll have a little breather. You don't have to start discussions immediately. But I'm going to start the candle light for this. And the next 15 minutes, we're going to be talking about what would you say if someone says, these are the exceptions. The rest of the scholars are doing a great job today. So I want you guys make groups of 3, I think. Yeah, I think 3 or 4 is a good amount of groups to have. You guys will have the timer until 7, I'll show you the timer later, until 7:30 actually. Yeah, you guys will have until 7:30. Discuss, you have 250 character limit, so make it concise. How would you respond to somebody like this? Alright? You can think of verses if it comes to your mind, or hadith, but you don't necessarily have to include them. Your argument can be strong without them, with the stuff you learn. But how would you respond to someone saying, okay, everything you showed right now, everything you mentioned, these are just exceptions. The rest of the scholars are doing a great job.
अभी एक पॉडकास्ट कर रहा था, मुझे उसने बच्चे ने आगे से पता है कहा कि अगर आर्मी उधर चली जाएगी तो हम तबाह हो जाएंगे. उसने ये बोल दिया. ये एग्जैक्ट जुमला अबू बकर सिद्दीक को बोला था गया था कि अगर आर्मी चली गई तो 3 नुकसान अभी होने और चौथा नुकसान कुछ दिनों बाद नजर आएगा. अबू बकर सिद्दीक ने कहा कि अगर ये लश्कर चला गया और पीछे से सारे गैर मुस्लिम हो गए, मुर्तद हो गए और मदीने पे हमला कर दिया और मदीने में उम्महातुल मोमिनीन को बचाने के लिए अरब में कोई ना बचा और मदीने के कुत्ते उम्महातुल मोमिनीन के कपड़े अपने मुंह से खींच के उनको घरों से निकाल रहे हो और एक भी मुसलमान मर्द मदीने में ना हो जो उनको बचा सके, तब भी ये लश्कर उसामा का जाएगा. ये बताएं, ये प्रैग्मेटिक सोल्यूशन था अबू बकर सिद्दीक का टू ऑल दोस प्रैग्मेटिज्म चेसर जो उनको लेक्चर दे रहे थे कि अल्लाह के नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम का विसाल हुआ है, सारा अरब जो है ना गैर मुस्लिम होने वाला है, हो चुका आधे से ज्यादा, और तुम लश्कर भेजो, क्या पता हम पे हमला हो जाए. ये एग्जैक्ट जुमले हैं जो इस वक्त मिर्जा साहब भी, गांधी साहब भी एंड مسلمانوں کے انٹلیکچوئل لبرلز بھی اور جو آپ جسے کہہ رہے ہیں کہ جو میڈیا پہ جو چینل بیٹھے ہیں سیکولرز وہ بھی یہ بول رہے ہیں پاکستان کی اگر آرمی چلی گئی تو پرخچے اڑ جائیں گے ہمارے. یا بالکل اڑ جائیں گے, پرخچے اڑ جائیں گے. میں نے آپ سے کہا نا ابو بکر صدیق کا آنسر یہ ہے کہ اگر پرخچے اڑ جائیں اور مدینہ کے کتے امہات المومنین کے کپڑے اپنے منہ سے کھینچ کے ان کو گھروں سے کھینچ رہے ہوں اور ایک بھی پاکستانی نہ بچے ہماری ماؤں بہنوں کو بچانے کے لیے, ایک بھی مگر وہاں پہ جو فرض ہوا اللہ کی کتاب میں جو فرض ہوا وہ پورا نہ کیا تو ہماری مائیں بہنیں آخرت میں ہمیں آگ میں جلتی ہوئی کہہ رہی ہوں گی کہ بے شرم تیری وجہ سے, تیری لیک آف ڈیسیژن میکنگ کی وجہ سے, تیرے قرآن پہ ایمان نہ لانے کی وجہ سے. آج بتا تیرا پریگمیٹزم کدھر ہے؟ آج بچا کے دکھا مجھے جہنم کی آگ سے, ادھر سے نکال پریگمیٹکلی نکال کے دکھا مجھے جہنم سے. تو قرآن پہ ایمان نہیں لایا اور تو ان وسائل پہ ایمان لے آیا جن وسائل کو تو چاٹتا پھرتا تھا.